The campaign hit my feed and it was applauded in my circles for great work.
I'm in no way suggesting that they saw our campaign and they copied it, anything like that.
Come on, get off the fence.
What I will say is that we did it better, unfortunately.
Lead people into a moment, let them think it's one thing, and boom, introduce Snoop Dogg.
One thing I will say, I think there were some elements that would have improved it.
I'd like to know your lawyers so I can send you the bills.
This mother don't miss.
We're always on. We don't shut down. We're a software company. And ideas can often repeat themselves over and over and over again.
You know what? It's a sassy way of saying the truth. In this week's Memes and Machines, we covered a lot. We started with some practical advice for marketing functions of how you stay motivated when you're not necessarily following a seasonal calendar. How can you as a team make moments for your brand that are ownable? We talk about creative, some of the best creative work we've seen, both big and small. Talking about ads that have hit our feeds, like Snoop Dogg giving up smoking. More specifically, how a boring business leveraged a cult personality with a great, simple creative to cut through and transcend culture. We talk about the psychology of friction. Have you ever thrown away an apple box? And if not, why? We dive into that. And then we explore how marketers can create friction to elevate the experience for their customers. We touch on why being a niche creator is an advantage and what can brands learn about focusing on niches to elevate not just their social strategy, but their overall brand marketing. And finally, we conclude with the future. Meta have just launched some mind-reading technology. What could this mean for our future? Hope you enjoy. Like, subscribe, comment, do all that algorithmic noise. Come on, good to see you. I think we have a confession. We have to open this podcast with a confession. We have just spoken for approximately 20 minutes. I thought we dived into some great topics, had some great back and forth, revealed some marketing hacks that will blow your mind. And guess what? What happened? Tell the people.
We didn't hit record.
We didn't hit record. We didn't hit record. Oh.
I've forgotten what I said now, so it's lost forever.
It is lost forever. It reminds me a little, you know how we have quite a low barrier to entry setup? We have a microphone in front of us, some earphones, and we record on Riverside. When Stephen sees my content sometimes, he'll just DM me and go, you're supposed to run a world-class creative company, and you're literally, he said, get yourself some lighting and a microphone.
and press record.
And press record. Fair, we deserve that. I do want to cover some similar ground, so let's kick off. No time for the wiki, because I think it was a really interesting topic. We started by discussing Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving's coming up, so you're going to down tools, very busy period. My question is, how do you remain motivated in a company like yours that isn't as beholden to the seasonal calendar? You know, you're not gearing up to Christmas because people, you know, sign up at Christmas, etc., etc. So talk to me about how you keep a team motivated and yourself motivated when you have an always-on calendar.
Yeah, it's interesting. Every industry kind of has its own calendar. I think that's something I've come to learn is, you know, in the fashion industry, they'll activate around a few fashion weeks. Obviously, D2C companies, like you said, Black Friday is a kind of real tentpole moment. You know, if you're a sports brand, there's probably some competitions that you have to consider. And I think that gives a lot of structure. It gives a lot of structure to people's years. They can determine the times they want to sprint and the times they can probably earmark that I'm going to take some time off or I'm going to spend some time with the family, whatever. When you're building software, when you're building a tool like ours or anybody who's in tech, I'd say, you're kind of working on something which is always on. And you're usually building a product which is high growth, high expectation. And as a result, it's very difficult to find those times to really structure your year around. I think one thing that I've seen, an interesting trend I've noticed in this space is that there are some big tech companies, some big developer tools that I've worked with. Airbnb is an example of this. Superbase, or another one that I spoke to recently. They actually determine a couple of calendar dates in the year that they're going to couple all of their product releases around. So these are the 2 dates of the year that we're going to own. That those days, everybody's going to be talking about us. Everybody's going to be listening to content about us. And I think that's really interesting that, they've decided, right, we're going to set our calendar for the year. They say to the team internally that if you want to launch something, you want to ship something, it's going to be announced on this day. So it has to be released. It has to be, live before this date. And it kind of gives people that structure, that ability to work towards something. But it also, like we said, it gives you the benefit of not competing with any other brands for that mind share. And when you're trying to, release, you're trying to launch stuff where there's 100 other people doing something on the same day, you're probably not going to have that that awareness that you need. And so I think marching to the beat of your own drum is the really kind of interesting insight I've seen with a company like ours, where we don't have that seasonality. And so deciding on what are the dates, what are the tentpole moments, we don't have it where we couple it, we launch it, we group it into one day. But we do have big moments throughout the year that we will determine this is going to be something that we really sprint towards and that we really make a lot of noise around. And it just gives people that structure, that ability to know, okay, that's the moment I really need to run at. Throughout the rest of the year, we're always on. We don't shut down. We're a software company. And so I think not having those crazy moments, not having the craziness around Black Friday or the craziness around Christmas, it actually means that we can be consistently high quality throughout the whole year. And we know we're going to win by showing up every single day and getting 1% better, rather than trying to, let's be 200% better for this 1 week of the year. So I think there is benefits, is that it gives us that kind of sustained greatness over time.
Can I ask you a follow-up question?
Yeah.
Are you hands on keyboard all year?
I'm hands on keyboard all year, yes.
Dude, I wouldn't expect anything less. You know what? I love everything you say there, because you picked on some very nuanced points. One of them is actually it can be an advantage not being pulled in or drawn in to the world around you, right? If I think about, say, the fashion industry, they gear up around collections, etc. If I think about retailers, they're competing at Black Friday. If I think about more retailers going into Christmas, all of those spaces are very, very difficult. You better show up in the right way and take some big bets if you want to win Fashion Week, or you better show up in the right way if you want to win the Super Bowl. High risk, but yes, high reward. What's great about not being orientated by the world around you is you can create your own moments. And something that I like to think of them, or I tend to think of them as rituals. How do you set your own rituals within your team? And going as far as not just what the outside world sees, not just the moments, but the experience in going through those rituals. There are so many points in the year that you could technically own. So yeah, I think what you're describing there is interesting.
Yeah.
Catman, another thing I wanted to raise with you, I have seen lots of great content recently hitting my feeds. And it's not the obvious stuff. I can't say I've seen an amazing Christmas ad that has moved me in a way to behave and go buy shit. I can't say I've seen anything in Black Friday where I've just gone, whoa, that's the best thing I've ever seen. I need to go buy shit. However, I will say I keep seeing smaller pieces of content or smaller campaigns that have really hit me. One I saw that I know you will have a strong opinion on, from a company called Vestiaire, which are a luxury reseller. And effectively, if anyone hasn't seen this piece of content, it was basically a shot of Times Square, and it paints a picture of Times Square if it was littered with fashion. And it was kind of a play and an attack on the industry that is fast fashion, and it speaks to their values. Firstly, what did you think of that content? Why was it great, or why was it not great? Give me your take.
I think it was a good piece of content. So what I like about something like a piece of content like that, so Vestiaire Collective, they're luxury reseller, and one of their big kind of piece of messaging is that if you buy luxury, old luxury items, or you buy secondhand clothing, you're actually doing a huge service to the kind of environmental impact of fast fashion. Fast fashion, you buy a piece of clothing, you wear it 3 or 4 times, you chuck it in the bin. It doesn't last very long. It's not made to last. So it ends up in landfill. It ends up in, in the environment effectively. And so, it's very hard it's one of those problems that we as humans, we know about, but we don't really think about it. We don't really care. And I think what they've done is they've helped us visualize it. And they did it with AI. So they used kind of an AI generation tool to kind of create the renders. Now, the really interesting thing about that piece of content is that it does feel very similar to something we actually worked on 5 or 6 years ago. And what we did is we had the same, we had a brief from Brita, kind of water filter company, and the brief was to raise awareness around the environmental impact of plastic bottles. And again, same idea is it's very difficult for somebody to really kind of tangibly understand the impact of throwing plastic bottles away. And so what we did is we I think it was around summer, we worked with a bunch of influencers who were all going to these like beautiful beach getaways that summer. We had them take photos of them on the beach, and then we used Photoshop to put in renders of what those beaches would look like in the future if we don't reduce our plastic bottle use. And so the beaches were littered with plastic bottles. There was trash everywhere. There was kind of, a very realistic render of what that beach could look like. And it really struck with people. It had that kind of juxtaposition of a beautiful holiday destination and then plastic everywhere.
Yep.
I think the key was that the renders of ours almost looked real, right? They were very, very kind of believable. And so a lot of the comments were people going, "Oh my God, that's disgusting. You shouldn't stand there." One of the pictures we had was a mother with her children on the beach, and people were shocked that she would allow them. But we then went on to reveal that it wasn't real. These were renders. The interesting thing with the Vestiaire Collective piece is that I think you lost that shock moment because it was very clearly not real to begin with. It was almost too absurd that there would be clothes filling Times Square, right? So you kind of missed that shock and that ability to reveal the true nature of it. And actually, the one comment I would have is that the AI renders looked worse than the Photoshop renders. And I know we celebrate the AI in content creation a lot on this podcast, but for me, there are moments where actually getting someone to do the thing on Photoshop, and I think our renders took probably 2 or 3 weeks to get them all out. But that time actually made the campaign, in my opinion, more impactful because there was that element of believability about the campaign. One thing I will say is that the campaign really made me think about how with marketing, often you can I'm in no way suggesting that they saw our campaign and they copied it, anything like that. But what I will say is that ideas can often repeat themselves over and over and over again. And you have new products, you have new contexts, you have new pieces of technology which can be used to revive old ideas. I think this made me think about, I used to think about it all the time when we try and come up with concepts, is that you should have a bank of ideas that you have. And even if they've been executed before, often they can be used again. And nobody in marketing is really going to, there might be some words of shade thrown. But actually, if you can take an old idea, rework it, that's all creativity is. It's taking old ideas and repurposing them for a new context or a new message. And so, yeah, it was, I think, a good campaign. I think there were some elements that would have improved it. And I think we did it better, unfortunately.
Okay. Catman, I was going to say, get off the fence. You skirted around it. You were just saying we had a bag. What I will say, I agree with most of that, in the sense that the campaign hit my feed and it was applauded in my circles for great work and shining a light on a very important message. My personal opinion, I actually thought the execution, I'll go a step further, I thought it was naff. I thought it was clearly fake. And, the whole point that, to steer into real emotion, to evoke an emotion, and it not be kind of void, and just celebrated for virtue reasons and not really impact. When we did a similar mechanic, we lent into shock, and we lent into the antithesis of the perfect social feed. So we were thinking about all the psychological dynamics of where this content would live. We were thinking, okay, well, Instagram's perfect. Everyone's showing their perfect pictures time and time again. What if we stopped people in their tracks and ruined that? And then, to your point, we spent a hell of a lot of time curating all these various curators and ruining their summer shots and doing that. And then we overlaid that with a personal story from each of those creators, why they got in with the campaign, and what was really important about it. So for me, I go 100%, I can't argue with the results probably. For a simple piece of content, this has gone far and wide. They've reached lots of people and raised their awareness if that was the goal. But I will say that to do things exceptionally well, you have to look at the details and you have to think how people interact. And for me, this was a poor execution. I didn't rate it particularly, but I respected the territory. And my really honest take was, because the renders were so bad, I assumed it was a filter. I was like, oh, that's a really good filter. Someone's gone around Times Square with a camera and they're using a filter. And I thought, oh, as a filter, that's a good attempt. That's actually a really good filter. And if they'd have made that as a filter and worked with creators to tell a story in first person and narrated that in their own way, and they'd have worked with 20 different people to do that, I would have gone, this campaign was amazing. Bravo. However, I did think it was a little naff personally. I want to go side point. Snoop Dogg, he hit the headlines. When you talk about old tactics that work really well and we can rinse and repeat, what about the old switch and bait in marketing? Lead people into a moment, let them think it's one thing, and boom. Tell me about the Snoop Dogg giving up smoking. What did you think about it? And did you rate it?
Brilliant. I think like the best ideas are always the simplest, right? And so for those of you who aren't familiar, Snoop Dogg announces he's giving up smoking or smoke, right? Which hits the headlines, causes hysteria on Twitter, people going crazy. I think if anybody knows Snoop Dogg, a man who probably posts one ad a day with a different company, I think you could have seen this coming, but many didn't. And about 3 or 4 days later, he announced he was giving up smoke because he was announcing the launch of a smokeless fire pit, right? Which I think many people didn't quite see the fire pit coming. I thought it was going to be edibles or something, but he went with the fire pit. And I think this is someone who just really understands their audience to a deep level. He knew, like, what is the thing I can post that would get the single most amount of engagement, right? And that is, I'm giving up smoking. And in terms of pure awareness, right? Like pure getting people to know about the thing you're launching, it's probably the greatest execution that he could have done. A lot of people criticized it, I saw people saying, that's, it's too obvious. And like, is anyone actually going to buy a fire pit from this now? I think so. I think, there are some things where you're reaching so many people that the law of averages are that, yes, there is a huge audience of people who are going to purchase this. A week before Thanksgiving as well, where people are going home to their families, and it is actually a big problem. And they always had a fire pit, your clothes stink. It's not a great experience. I thought it was genius. Yeah,
I agree. It was one of the favorite things I've seen in a long time. And what I thought was the genius in the execution wasn't just the switch and bait. You've taken a piece of this guy's identity and said the most controversial thing you can say. Apart from his music, weed is the second biggest thing he's known for. So you think of that. And I think there's a broader point around marketing what you could deem a dull product. A fire pit, sure, it's cool, but it's not the most, sought after, change the world innovation that we've ever seen. But there was something really good about bringing the celebrity and the theater and the association with Snoop Dogg. I actually don't think Snoop Dogg would have had a hand in that. I think he would have just gave it his stamp of approval.
Yeah.
I think whoever's the marketing people or the agency behind the idea. Conceptually, it's wonderful. I could see that in a pitch deck. You could see the narrate. You've all heard of Snoop Dogg. He's famous for these things. And you start to narrate what was going to happen. And actually, in theory, you have an idea. But then when it actually lives in the world and lands like that, I got to respect it. So, yeah, I agree. I think if we were to give a memes and machines ad of the month, I'm going to go with that for many reasons. Taking something seemingly simple and boring and bringing it to life in a reverent, incredible, creative way that earned everyone's attention. I think I got to respect it. I will say as well, even we're celebrating these big moments that are transcending, I've seen a lot of great work from smaller companies as well. There's a business in the UK called Unplugged. And I don't mean smaller in a disrespectful way, but it's a startup, a growing business in the UK. And Unplugged is a retreat where you leave your phone and just spend time with your family and, try and detach from this thing we're all addicted to, right? Nice concept. Go out in the wild, and apparently they give you a really nice experience. And one of the things I saw the founder post was what looked like a email complaint from one of the guests. And what was really interesting about this particular complaint is it was so outrageous that people were like, is that real? That's crazy. They wanted to interact with it. And the complaint was that, finally we've put our phones down. I've spent some time with my husband and I found out I hate him. So the reality is, we're getting divorced and I'd like to know your lawyers so I can send you the bills, right? So that's so outrageous, clearly not real, or probably not real, right? I'm going to say clearly not real. What was really interesting and how I knew it was a fake, without delving into the comments and really interrogating this, was the fact that it was filled with compliments about their products and features. Like, I love the hand soap, this was this. And I just thought, you know what? When we talk about formats that you can repeat, that are ownable, there are so many classics like the fake email or every brand's done it, but dude with a sign. It still works, right? It still bangs. The classic own a set of memes always works. The switch and bait, the shocking feed. And I think the lesson that marketers can take, and actually if you're going into, say, a pitch process or you're trying to come up with a seasonal campaign, I don't think there's anything better than just collecting inspiration from the world around you. And to your point, creating a source of truth, a source of inspiration that you can keep dipping into. And actually you find when you start those sparks of ideas leading from one to another, and you're drawing from one branch to lead to the brief, I think it's an incredible process. And you always find, like, when you hit the idea, you get this kind of shared understanding and consensus amongst everyone. It's like, that's it. But yeah, I want to say it doesn't always have to be the big ideas that cut through. I think the simple things can be highly effective, and you can own one channel, one format. You can rinse and repeat that time and time again and gain incredible success when you find that. It actually reminds me of a quote I read this week. And basically the quote was, the nicher you go, the quicker you grow. And I thought, you know what? It's a sassy way of saying the truth, but the nicher you go, the quicker you grow. And it was so true. I was thinking about this in the context of creators. If you want to own the finance vertical, you shouldn't be a finance creator. You go very deeper. You go deeper and you're like the person that's a specialist in buying and selling houses, or the person who's a finance creator on pensions, right? That's how you kind of find your space in the world. If you're a technology creator, that's too vast and varied. You go all in on testing AI products for creative production, and that's how you win. If you're in marketing like us, really, if you want to win, if you want to grow quickly, go deeper. You are a specialist in TikTok growth, right? You kind of get the point. I do wonder, and I want to ask you, if we believe this to be true, the niche you go, the quicker you grow, how can brands take that and leverage that wisdom when they think about their marketing strategies?
Yeah, I think it's like if you're doing marketing for everyone, you're reaching no one, right? So like there's a lot to be said for, especially when you're starting out. I think there are some brands that have the luxury of going wide. If you have that existing reach, you can kind of post content which is for everybody. But just the way that social media works now, the way the algorithms are structured, is that everybody is kind of now divided into these very kind of niche communities, and more you see it when you scroll on TikTok, you see it when you scroll on Instagram. You're finding content which is just eerily catered to you. Like, this is content that is literally specifically for, I don't know, in my case it might be a British guy living in the US, right? Like, it's like that has found me. So these algorithms are now so powerful that you need to be creating content which is going to be picked up to these algorithms and carried to your specific audience, right? And so, like, getting closer to your customer, I think, is the key. Like, really understanding who they are and what are the things they consume really well. I think a good example of this is Foot Asylum. They have an incredible content strategy, particularly on YouTube. They have a huge YouTube presence, and their shows aren't around sneakers. They're not around, athletic wear. They're about everything else that they know their core customer engages with. It's about music, it's about culture, it's about creators, but they just know their audience so deeply. They know exactly the kind of content they want to consume. And then the product is a kind of nice to have. And so, yeah, it's just really understanding deeply who are your customer, what are the kind of things they want to consume, and then operate like a media company. Like, I don't want to be creating content that's necessarily about the thing I'm selling. I want to create content which is about the person that I'm selling to, and the thing I'm selling will reach them eventually.
Yeah, it's long been conventional wisdom. It was famously said by the CMO of Red Bull, is when he was talking about online. This is how far I'm going back, but he would say people don't go on websites to look at a can of drinks. And the point was, you have to think like a media entity. And Red Bull built a brand around doing that. And to your point, I just think algorithms and the environments in which we are all connected have just amplified that further and further. And as you were describing Foot Asylum to me, it really resonated, and it's what I've come to believe, that there's a real irony in the fact that the least effective way to sell anything on social media is actually try and sell that thing exactly on social media. There's a real irony. You kind of do everything, but you speak about your values, what you stand for, and to your point, you attach yourself to all the important things in your customer's world. And I do believe that's been propagated quite heavily by the shift in algorithms. So algorithms used to be connection-based. So you would be served things based on who you were connected to and things that they were likely to be associated with. Now we've transitioned into an interest and passion-based algorithm where you are served things not based on your connections, but what you're interested in. And again, this amplifies and accelerates this idea of being niches. So in a practical, or attaching yourself to a niche. So if I'm every brand, I think first and foremost, you have to learn who you are and who you want to be in the world. Classic marketing, learn about your customers, but not in the sense of how old they are, where they live, those types of things. The old demographics. I actually think it's more important to go deeper and just think of the 3 or 4 things that they love in their world and they over-index on, and make sure you as a brand are associated, or to your point, creating content on those themes. And that's probably the bare foundation of a really exceptional social strategy, right?
Yeah, I think that's spot on. Yeah, and I think the kind of reverse way of doing that, right, is that you figure out what your customers' interests and passions are, and then you build connections with people that align with them, right? Then you work with creators, then you work with influential people to put a face to all of this. But it should be that way around, rather than let's find the people that connect to first and then have them shoehorn our messaging in.
I wonder if on the Snoop Dogg example, this like fire pit company just found out that all their customers just loved weed. So they're like, love weed. We've done some social listening. We found that your customers are high all the time. Boom, introduce Snoop Dogg. There's part of me would have loved to have been in that. I could have sold the idea. I tell you what.
I think when I think about the way they came up with the idea, I think it's probably likely that somebody had the idea of, let's get a high-profile stoner to give up smoking. If we can get Snoop Dogg, then great. If not, we'll get Tiger, we'll get, Wiz Khalifa, we'll go down the list. But get a Snoop Dogg and this will go very far. So that's why I like to think it happened.
Yeah, probably. We are about truth on this podcast. That is the reality. Catman, I've got a question for you. I'm conscious of your time. So how I plan to do this, I'm going to ask you just a couple of questions. And then I think I'm going to do a mini monologue rant of something that's been bugging me lately to conclude. But my question is, do you throw away packaging when you buy a new item? Let me ask you a question.
Yes.
Yes, in the majority of cases.
Aggressively, yeah. I used to hold on to things, but I realized recently, like, having like a MacBook box in my room for like 2 years because it looks nice. Now I'm very merciless when it comes to throwing anything away. There isn't a thing that I bought.
Okay. Well, it's funny you say that. I was going to ask you, do you keep your Apple product boxes?
I used to, now I do not.
Okay. Well, if you look at the data, 86% of people keep their Apple box, whether that's their iPhone or their MacBooks. And you go, why? Why would I keep this redundant thing? Maybe it's because I have an intention to sell it in the future and I can maybe garner some more value. Maybe that's it. Maybe. Well, actually, you know what it comes down to? A patent. I didn't know this, but I found out that Apple have a patent for their box.
Mm-hmm.
If you open an Apple product, it's a very specific experience. You get the pop.
Yeah.
They have a patent for their air pocket, and that's the friction that they create between the box. And what's really interesting when you think about packaging more broadly, products that are deemed cheap have either no friction in their packaging, meaning it's like too easy to get to the product, or they have not enough. Or they have like too much. So they don't have enough friction, or they have too much. It's like impossible. You have to get out the scissors and you can't get to it. Both of those extremes feel just feel cheap. And that's the impression you get, right? However, premium products have this perfect blend of giving you this nice bit of friction that elevates your experience, elevates your unboxing or your opening of your luxury product. So my question to you is, can we use friction in a digital sense to create a sense of premium?
It's a great question. Yes. I think a good example of this, I can't think right now.
Okay, I'm gonna tee you up because you are right to say yes. I actually think, the space when we're waiting for things, and I think about this in UX design.
Yeah.
I admire great design that makes me feel something or just gives me the impression that something smart is happening. So when I go on a product, if the sense of a non-premium product or service to me would be I go on the website, I have to wait a while. That to me is like friction that I don't need. However, if you make me wait a while, but then there's something happening, there's a graphic, there's an animation, and I feel something, I go, love this. I am a sucker for great UX. And I actually think it's something when we think about our brands, whether that's online, whether that's websites, whether that's products, whether that's services, I almost think we should think about these little pockets of friction that elevate who we are in the world. So what I'm going to do now, when you get in contact with Flight Story, you're not going to get a very quick response. Usually, I would expect you would get a response within 2 hours. Now I'm going to make you wait. But then there's going to be like some theatre and you're going to get an AI video and you're going to get this. No, I'm joking, by the way. But I do think it's things that maybe marketing and brand marketers don't think about enough.
Yeah, I think there's actually, a number of examples where just putting in a little bit of friction can actually sometimes lead to more like interaction. I'll give you an example. So this is a very like Web3 NFT specific example. We've seen it with our products. If we want to launch a new product, we want to do some kind of marketing initiative. If we put in a little piece of friction where somebody has to claim like an NFT to access something, we could do it. So let's say we we have this experience which is behind like an experience to unlock something. We could just do it that you put in your email, you get the thing. We've done it in the past though, where you have to claim an NFT, use that NFT to unlock the thing. Actually, more steps, but it feels like you're getting something. It feels like more of an experience, and like you said, it feels more premium. It feels like you're getting a key and you're unlocking a door. And actually, by adding that tiny piece of friction, we've seen the amount of people that are going to come and do that thing increase significantly. And so you see it. This is the kind of playbook when it comes to joining wait lists or having to get a certain code to enter something. It actually creates that element of secrecy and intrigue, which I think actually increases the FOMO and will drive more people to do it. And so, like, it's somewhere between premium, but also just that element of, oh wow, that friction makes it feel like, okay, there's some kind of reason for me to really want to get this thing.
I love that example. It really brings it to life, and I think about customer experience a lot, particularly on the work that we do with our clients, and it's maybe an area that I don't think we proactively try and recommend, because we're often trying to remove friction or lower barriers and just make it easier to do that last click and all those types of things. But the greatest brands in the world have a subtlety to how they behave. There is nuance to everything that they do, but underpinning all of that is real intention about seemingly giving better experiences. Dude, I know you have to shoot, so I am going to finish this podcast on a bit of a rant. Do stick around if you want to.
I do have to jump on this call. Wow,
you have a day job. This is not your full-time gig. Get away. Get away. Good chatting, my man.
All right, enjoy. You can edit this bit out if you want. If I can't understand it. All right.
I think we keep it in. We keep in the edit this bit out. We create a bit of friction. Interestingly enough, we don't edit anything out of this podcast unless we royally mess up and have a break. I want to conclude by sharing something I watched on YouTube from a YouTube creator called Cold Fusion. They make the most amazing documentaries about science, technology, and business. And they're a very specific format. They're about 15 minutes long, so they're great to watch. And I was drawn in and hooked because the headline was Meta just launched mind reading technology. And I thought, I need to watch this. And how the documentary or the docu-series frames itself is it starts with Minority Report. And if you haven't seen Minority Report as a film, it's a Tom Cruise film whereby it's built around a future state where you can get arrested for crimes that haven't been committed. Thought crime, they call it pre-crime, and they go out and prevent people from creating crime, and they have eradicated crime in the world. Quite a dark sci-fi type of film. What was really interesting there was that outlaying the film narrative and thinking that felt so abstract and so far removed from what may happen in the world, they started then to unravel some new technologies and some new breakthroughs and innovations in neurotechnology that basically make a world like that seem not too far away. And let me explain. So there was a breakthrough in neurotech, and one of the breakthroughs was decoding using AI to decode brainwaves and translate them into language. What's happened over the last decade, there's been a huge amount of progress as these technology stacks, whether that's decoding and neurotechnology, combining that then with a large language model to then create a generative text model that then is overlaid with an image generation. So by combining these different tech stacks, we have now got to a state where Meta have basically taken brain scans, asked people to think something, a picture or an image, not even orate it, think it, and they are able to generate an image that is basically exactly the same. And I believe the test was like, look at this image on the left, and it was a picture of a cat in a field, and then they would say, think about this image. And you would think about this image, and the generative model would recreate it. And of course, it's not perfect, But I will say that this really got me thinking about a future state in marketing, whereby marketing, in many respects, has been an art of understanding people, using insight and data, using research to make educated guesses and doing creative things to connect with people. I see in the not too distant future, when you think of technologies like this, whereby we will soon take the guesswork out of marketing. Our ability to test information and products, our ability to augment messaging to make it perfectly suited to me as an individual, that's within the very near future. And when we go into a not too distant future, this idea that we can influence people and connect with people in new ways, and I think it'll coincide with some hardware revolution that isn't a mobile phone. But I highly recommend, first and foremost, if you're interested in technology, AI, and have a bit of a soft spot for sci-fi, I recommend going and watching this Cold Fusion documentary, because it really did open my mind to some new possibilities that won't just impact, marketing. I think in marketing, we often trivialize technology because we use it in really functional, pragmatic ways. ChatGPT, we're using it as a copy assistant when really it can be so much more than that. But I highly recommend this documentary. And on that note, we will conclude this week's Memes and Machines. One thing I would love, we are now coming up to, 13, 14, 15 episodes, and we've been doing it consistently week after week. If you have stuck around to the end and you are our small, loyal community, please give us some feedback. Leave a comment. Let us know what you think. Subscribe, all of that good stuff. Because going into next year, as we end 2023, we are thinking a lot about how do we turn this into something bigger and better? How do we start to create a system where we can introduce guests and bring different ideas to the table? So that's the ambition, but I love feedback. So if you have any, please share them, the good, the bad, and the ugly. I'll see you next week.